So I guess I'll start us while I'm firing up this cigar. That this is the first official podcast of Kendall Projects.
You're going to share that cigar, aren't you?
No, but we want to give a shout out to Tom Burns at Light 'Em Up Cigars here in Columbia, South Carolina. This is one of his signature man cave band of brothers. If you're in Columbia area and you want to get out, make sure you go by Light 'Em Up Cigars and check this out. This is one of my go-to sticks. Hopefully it's not too humid in here today and it won't get ruined. But since we got a hurricane going on outside, well, not hurricane now. I guess it's a tropical storm.
It's a tropical storm, officially, is what they call it.
And then we're joined here by my wife, Faith Kendall, who's seen the good, the bad, the ugly of Kendall Projects. And I think I might have mentioned the idea of her interviewing me this first time, and I think she kind of taken the ball and run with it. And so I'm nervous about what she's going to ask or where she's going to kind of steer the conversation. But we are also videotaping this today, as well as doing an audio recording, which will be put on SoundCloud too. So if you're hearing us and not seeing us, there is a video available for you to see if you want to see what we look like in the studio and whatnot. So, okay, so we're going to get started.
Well, so my name is Faith Kendall, as he said, and we apologize ahead of time if there are any children running through. We are the Kool-Aid house of the cul-de-sac, and so although there is a hurricane, we have children that are constantly in and out on the trampoline, playing in the rain, so we will just kind of ignore that. But today, my goal is to help you guys to... Am I supposed to be looking at this? It doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
This is just a conversation.
To help you guys to kind of understand who Jason is and how it came about to be in his 43 years of life. In the art community, all of his art friends, all his music friends, most people know him by Kendall. And today you're going to learn about Jason. And I have not, he doesn't know the questions. I wrote the questions. And we spend a lot of time on Friday nights just having conversations with each other. So really this is no different than what we do on Friday night, date night. So I just wanted you guys to get an idea of where his ideas come from. So we'll start.
Okay.
So my first question is, what is your earliest memory of making art?
I think what I remember, the earliest memory I guess that I have is I wasn't a big fan of coloring books. I ended up drawing pictures on the white cover, inside the white covers, and then my mom would buy typing paper that I would eventually, just draw black and white drawings on. But I do remember a time where I would have like one of those clear kids' rulers with the different shapes and having a circle. And that's how I started drawing people. I would draw the circle and then draw the body. But one of the things I do remember is pressing down so hard and not understanding that when I was drawing, my side of my hand would get dirty, and then having to start over and over and over again.
How old were you?
I don't know. This is before kindergarten, easy. Yeah, I'm sure it's before kindergarten, so probably 3 or 4. I guess that's what I remember the most. And I did it all the time. It was like obsessive, I think, at a point. Yeah, that was my earliest memory of actually making images, per se.
Now I know where our girls get it from. So what would you say, when people ask me all the time, oh, your husband's an artist, what kind of art does he do? Well, all of the above.
Yeah.
So my question then is, can you remember your very first, what you would consider your very first sculpture?
I think it probably had to be something in elementary school. I made a costume in elementary school that was based on a He-Man figure. We did mask. made it out of construction paper, and so I do remember that. Like I remember making things like that, like school projects. And then when I was in high school, I was in the AP classes, and I had to make sculpture as part of the requirements. I didn't like it too much. I was 3D was an element you had to do, and I don't even think I put much effort into that sculptural process. So those are my earliest recollections of tinkering with making three-dimensional objects.
But you love doing it today, so why did you hate it in high school?
I think one of the reasons is I didn't understand it then. I didn't understand until after leaving football and going to art school that I didn't really understand what it meant to make sculpture. I didn't have any true, I don't know, I didn't have an understanding. I hadn't had any exposure to what that meant. So, and up until that point, art classes were really easy for me, and I always got A's in them without. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I worked real hard. I did a lot of drawing. I did a lot of investigation on two-dimensional images and how to create them realistically and studying and all that. Don't get me that wrong. But when I got to art school, my first Sculpture 1 class was my first introduction, and it really kicked my ass. And I had first time in my entire art academic career that I got anything less than an A, and I think I struggled to get a C plus in the class.
Who was the professor?
Her name was Roxy Thomas. She's no longer with us. She passed away several years ago of ovarian cancer when I was in graduate school. But she was hardcore with me. Much like I think I would have to say she was, I would consider my experience and my relationship with her is right up there with any football coach or athletic coach that I had ever had. And it was that kind of challenging rapport. And, I mean, she pissed me off all the time.
I remember the year that when we were married and you had classes with her. We got married in 2000 and you had one more year left. And for an entire year, you would just, oh, she made me so mad. God, listen to what she did today.
Yeah, she would call me on my shit. I mean, that really comes
Careful
down to
with the language.
Hey, this is nope. This is Kendall Projects. This is no. We don't have to worry about FCC rules on this one.
Yeah, but there might be people
we're
that
not having this conversation. We're not having this conversation. So I can say fuck, shit, damn.
No.
What I want. So anyway, so she would kick my ass and call me on my shit all the time and tell me if I was half-assing it or if I was being stubborn or whatever. Like, she just would really call me on it, and she was the best at that. And not even just me. Like, I'm not just saying I was like, you know, her. But that's kind of the way she was with everybody.
Was that I remember the sculpture you did that was it was metal, and I think it was metal, it was a window, and there were sheets coming out of it. That was her class?
Yeah, that was her class. I think that was the sculpture too, and that's probably, if we can, maybe we'll have a bit in the video, I'll find a picture of it and put it in here. But that was one of the first pieces that I made in her class that got an A. And
why do you think she gave you an A?
Well, because I understood, or I created something that was transcendental, or it was more than just an object. It created some kind of experience. It created its own story without me having to explain it. In her class, what I learned is that the artist, once the thing is made, when it's on the wall or it's in the room or whatever in the gallery, when a public, somebody you don't know, sees it, you don't get a chance to describe it or explain it away. Now you could probably put a title card on the wall, but you don't get an opportunity to give. Well, this is what I was thinking when I was making this. You gotta let the piece kind of stand for itself, and
Right.
that's one, and that, I think that piece was the first piece that I didn't have to say a whole lot. It was the critique that I got to sit back and listen to everybody else talk about it without me having to defend my decisions. And also, there's something about that she talked about, and it's craftsmanship. It was very clean. All the tricks that I used to make the piece were hidden. They couldn't be seen. The window, basically, we'll try to explain it to people, it was a metal frame of a window, and it floated off the wall, and what I did was hide the beam that was connected to the wall inside the curtains that were connected, so you couldn't see that how this frame was 2 feet off the wall and hanging when there was nothing from the ceiling that was hanging. I had made this beam that was hidden in the curtains. So
Was that also in? I'm remembering these. I think your mom still has them at the house. There were these heads that were different sizes. They're red.
yeah, that wasn't Roxy. That was my 3D design class. They weren't calling it my first year at Ringling. It was a 3D design. We had to create a sculptural sequence, and it had to be. We had to use plaster to do that. So that was the parameters of the project. So that's what I did. So it was like
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So what happened to that window?
I'm sure it got. We were lucky enough at Ringling to have a really great supply of metal, and it just got recycled because it was steel
Mm-hmm.
and was welded together. I think the parameters of that project, it was a welding unit. We had to weld, and we had to use fabric. She was really good about taking fabric and metal and these kind of contradictory materials and forcing us to combine them in a way that was unexpected or challenging for us. Always pushing us out of our comfort zone. Always.
Okay, so let's go back to your childhood. I have two questions that kind of really sound like they'd be together. So, the question was, who would you say influenced your art career as a child? Like today, who would you credit? And then it goes with this that says, you were around a lot of people at an early age crafting. Like your mom was constantly sewing and making like she makes the best Christmas ribbons for, she could do anything. She can crochet blankets. I call her Martha Stewart's sister. And then your granny, cross stitching, and even so far as your dad, who can build anything. Does any of that spill into your work today?
Yeah, I don't think I could not credit all that stuff. It's really, now that I'm thinking about that, there are still a lot of creative, talented, if you will, people in my family along with that. So yeah, I think I absorbed all those sensitivities of having to solve problems, and even the stuff I do now. I think drawing wise, I think my Uncle Robbie is and was then still very talented and able to draw well. A very a good draftsman.
I didn't know that.
And when I was in middle school and high school, he had a great. I'm sure he still has them. There's a great collection of the Disney animation books where they would profile the animators and show their technique and show their drawings, and this is before video, so this was the only exposure I had to how people drew these things that I loved in movies, etc. So, yeah, and then I don't think, and that's the initial image making. That was my initial influence, I think. And then, of course, it branched out into, you know, I copying comics and stuff, and over the years, in my formative years, learning, Dungeons and Dragons, X-Men, Batman, like all these guys that were drawing my favorite characters. But I don't think until much later did the other stuff start informing the work, like the crafts part of it, the building part of it. But back to Roxy, like that was something that she made me realize, like I was a huge resource that I had of experience that I could draw from if I needed to. And craftsmanship, that was always a big part of. I saw that in my life and my family's work and what they did. So it was easy for me to transfer that knowledge into academic art making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, watching your daddy. If you don't know who Carl Kendall is, he just rebuilt at age 70 2 transmissions for 1990s trucks. I mean, he can completely take an engine apart and put it all back together, and it just keep on going. So watching how he solves problems, or how he did solve problems growing up, helps you now use that in your art to solve the problems. Because you use a lot of those same tools. You get most of your art supplies from Lowe's,
Yeah.
Shout out to Lowe's. Anybody who wants to do a grant or anything. We spend more money at Lowe's than we do at any other store.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your middle school and high school career. And so last night I asked you a really simple question. Did you ever want to play football? And your answer was?
I don't remember.
No.
I probably said no, but I didn't know that I didn't.
And then my next question was there ever a football season that came up that you were excited to start? And you said?
No. I think maybe one. Now we're talking, maybe one out of all the years that I played, one.
When did you start playing football? 7th grade, right?
Yeah, 7th grade.
So 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade.
We're going to have to stop for 1 second and reset. We got cameras going, and I don't have super expensive cameras, so we are going to have to reset because we only got 20 minutes. Bam, they just went off time limit on that. So we're going to reset here. Hang tight. All right.
Okay, I feel like I'm a huge fan of Bravo TV, The Real Housewives. I feel like, and we're back. And
we're back.
Everybody puts their cell phones down for the commercial break. Okay, so back to what I was saying. So you played football 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, freshman of college, sophomore college, junior college, 9 years, and there was only one season you were looking forward to. What was that season? Why?
Well, 2 now, but I guess excited. I don't know about excited, but looking forward to. But there was, going into my junior year in high school, like we had a group of guys that we were really excited about being together. But I can't honestly say that I was looking forward to it.
What'd you dread then?
It was painful. It was not a lot of fun. I think.
So why'd you do it?
Let me finish. Then jumping forward to the season that I was looking forward to was my last year playing college football, and I truly felt like I was prepared going in, and I was the best physical shape that I could have been at that time. But the season got turned over, and all the things that I hated about playing the sport all came back to haunt me. And so hold on a second while I'm talking. So yeah, that was. Yeah, that was the only one I can say there. So back to you. What did you just say? Your question? What was that?
9 years of football and only one season you thought you were excited about. And I don't want you to say too much because I'm really pushing him and encouraging him to write a book about his experience at football because I feel like there are so many kids out there nowadays who think that's what they want to do and their parents are forcing them to play football. In all honesty, they don't really know why they're out there. And they don't truly enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that I'm right there with you on that.
So let's go back to middle school. We'll pause that because when the
That's a
book comes
deep-
out,
that's
you
a
can read
deep-
the book. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a touchy subject, possibly for anyone listening. I did a podcast last year that really kind of delved into that, so I don't want to rehash too much
Right.
of that because it's out there, and we'll talk more about that later. And if you're watching or listening to this, you can probably you can access on SoundCloud as well as Facebook, Kindle Projects. So.
Okay, so 6th grade, you finished elementary school. You're headed to Dent Middle School.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this either, but you played the trombone,
Mm-hmm.
and you were really good at it.
Yeah.
And we talked about this last night. Why'd you choose the trombone, first of all, when you started in the band?
Now's not time.
Up.
No.
Here we go. Here's the twins. Go to the other door, girls. Okay, so
Right.
why'd you pick up the trombone?
All right, so the trombone story is like I was talking about my Uncle Robbie earlier. He was in marching band in high school. I don't know why he didn't do it in college, but because he went to USC. But he played the drums, and that's always like the rocks. That's kind of like the badass. That's if you want to be in the band, and
Be a drummer.
guy, be a drummer.
Right.
And then my cousin Devin was already in the band. He was a year ahead of me. Was in the band. He was a drummer as well. And I was like, I'll try that. But now looking back on it, I even now like I wish I could play the drums. And it's really, but because of it's really really weird. I'm left eye dominant, so I shoot or aim left-handed, but I'm right-handed. And drumming requires an equal agility in both hands. My right hand is 10 times more agile than my left, and I never could get them to sync up. And so the band director at the time was like, why don't you be a trombone player? And I guess because of my size and my ability to
Blow a lot of hot air.
blow a lot of hot air, I guess. I took to it. And then also, too, I had already kind of learning to read music was easy because I had grown up in a musical family. My mom played organ in the church. My aunt played the piano, sang in the choir.
Your dad sings.
My dad sang. Of course, he can't read music, but so all those things that was part of. That was all that. That was part of that.
So it was just a random. Yeah, I'll play the trombone.
No, it was like, I want to be in band, and then the band director was like, "You're going to play the trombone." That's the way it was like. And then also too, we had I think my mom was selling Tupperware still at the time, or someone that she worked. No, she was somebody. Anyway, the trombone we got for free. I think that, and so musical instruments for a middle class family at that time in the mid '80s, that was expensive. So to get an instrument for free was really that was kind of like the deal breaker.
So I've talked to you a lot about how you drive me crazy because things appear to come so easy to you. Was the trombone easy, or did you just work hard at it?
I think a little bit of both. I think the musical part of the music, of learning how to read music and understanding time signatures and time signatures and keys and how my part fit into the rest of the music came really easy to me. However, I worked. I enjoyed playing.
You were first chair. Tell a story about last night, about the little kid that tried to beat you out of first chair.
We'll talk about that in a second. But I worked real hard at it. Let's just say that I worked real hard at that, and we'll just leave it at that right now. I worked real hard at playing, and I enjoyed it, and I knew the music, and I took a lot of pride in blowing an audience away. And I'm sure there's probably audio tapes of the bands that I played in. We traveled too. The band and even middle school, we traveled to competitions and did well. And I was within the first 9 weeks of my seventh grade year playing in the band, I was first chair, and I kept it. And I think I only lost it once or twice after that because I wasn't prepared, and I just never let that happen again.
So if you are not familiar with the way a band works, you have first chair, second chair, third chair, and then you could compete and you could have a competition to try to beat somebody. So the best trombone player would be first chair. The second best would be second chair.
And also, what you don't know, when you're getting sheet music too for a band, like first chair has the hardest parts.
Right.
To learn. The lower down the road, the easier as the parts you did. And one of the reasons I worked real hard is because I didn't want to have to learn a new part. If you got busted in a challenge or a test and you got moved down, you had to learn the music all over again. And it was just, and honestly, the music at lower chairs just weren't a lot of fun to play. So I wanted to make sure that I was.
Yeah, you knew it.
I wanted to know that I was playing the best part that I could. So
yeah. So why'd you quit?
I didn't have a choice. It was football or when you go to high school, it's one or the other. You couldn't be in the marching band at halftime and be on the field most of the game. So that was not. And then I think too that I want to say, I could be wrong, but I want to say that even concert band was discouraged because you weren't playing for the first 50 days of the year with the group. So going to concert band was discouraged because they didn't want you to have to, because I would have been starting last chair coming into concert band series. So, but it was very, it was either or.
So if you had it to do all over, what would you have your young self? What would you tell your young self?
Well, a couple things is I don't think I'd play football. I think knowing now, we'll get into this another time, and we're going to talk more about this with this current project that I'm working on. But I would have been a swimmer. I don't think my parents could have afforded it at the time, but I think I have my physical ability of swimming is equally as football. If I would have had the formative training back in the time, and I would have been. And I would have hoped that I could have exposed my younger self to music that I wasn't exposed to until much later on in life, to realizing that the trombone.
You could jam on a trombone.
Yeah, it's just a versatile instrument. It's a versatile instrument, and it's And for those of you who don't know, Faith to tell you, I play a lot of slide guitar now. And that's when you have like a thing on your finger and you slide back and forth. And the trombone is very much the same thing. It's this fluid woo back and forth where it's no like boom, boom, boom. It's much more fluid. And I think a lot of that experience playing trombone transfers into how I make sounds on the guitar now. So, yeah.
It's funny. I dated a trombone player in high school.
I know. It's funny.
Yeah. Okay, so I've heard a lot of your family members, myself included, ask you all the time to make you an art piece that's happy, or why are so many of your pieces the people look so angry or so sad, or is it just not in your DNA to paint pretty paintings for people to put on their couches?
That's a hard question to answer.
I know, that's why I asked it.
I always go back to like my music. We talk about music, my musical influences, like the songs that I tend to gravitate towards, or are the blues, or something along that, a struggle. Hard times. So that's one reason. And also, too, I think that the greatest art comes from struggle.
But people don't want to put pictures of angry or sad looking?
Well, I think people that are looking for that are going to Target or Walmart and buying that stuff, or they want palm trees and birds and dogs and all that, and that's fine. And I'm not downing on that. It's just not my sensibility. That's not what turns me on. That's not what gets my juices flowing. I like to.
You're not a decorator.
Well, I like to contemplate on the uglier side of life, because I think
the side that people don't want to talk about.
Yeah. I think social media is a perfect example of that now. How we all kind of curate the best parts of our lives, and instead of talking about the down and dirty, ugly stuff. And we all have that. I think I reflect that. I have to remind myself that I'm no angel or no saint, and
none of us are.
Well, but people don't like to admit that, and I think some of my art reminds us that the choices that we make are ugly and bloody and scary and all that. Yeah. That's so. Yeah.
Yeah. There's my dad. You did a series of reasons as triathlon drawings, where you've got the overweight, the obese man sitting in the background, almost like
obese,
devil.
It was a glutton demon.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that knowing my dad passed away and he was morbidly obese, and he made the comment, he related to that because he said, when he saw that drawing, he said, well, now I know what Jason thinks of me. And it's interesting is that it had nothing to do with him.
Yeah, I think we have that. I have that. I mean, I struggle. I have always struggled.
I struggle with it too.
I struggle with my weight, and I like drinking too much. I like eating too much. I like smoking too much.
And those are the demons that haunt us.
Yeah, they are. And I think that when we're acknowledge them, that pushes us forward. We fall forward, as my dear friend likes to say. We fall forward.
Yeah. So, are we good on time?
We're good. We got about 6 minutes. We got to break again.
Okay. So I have a long paragraph. I'm just going to kind of read it. As your wife, I've watched your art career, even starting throughout high school. You know, I remember seeing you and your drawings. Your themes they appear to be so vast, but they always come back to football. So I think back to when we were first married in college. You created Arthur Sugar and the Blue Collar Worker. Then you did the Severed Football Head, which would scare me to death at night. And then you went to the Dorothy Project. Then you went back to the football with the Blitz pieces. And then the zombie cheerleaders. And then you took a break with your Driving On series. And then back to football helmets. Are you conscious and fully aware that your work always returns to football? And why do you think that happens?
I think it's, well, there's a lot of reasons I go back to it. I think right now, if you're even remotely plugged in, you're aware of the controversy around football itself. I don't know if I would have come back to it if the controversy wasn't so well in our culture right now, so well versed or well represented in our culture right now. And obviously it's not resolved for myself. It's starting to be. I'm starting to have distance from it that I haven't been able to have. And I think that but I think it's always going to be there because it's such a distinct part of my experience as a human being. So I think that's why I think that it's always going to be hinted at, either directly or indirectly, in all of my art. Because something that I've realized recently, like a lot of the work that I've done throughout my entire career, has dealt with the idea of being an ex-athlete. Mm-hmm. And within the last, I guess, probably the last 4 months, as I've come to the realization that for me, there's no such thing as an ex-athlete. I'm going to always be an athlete. So that has changed and will continue to change the work that I make. Instead of coming from an ex-athlete, I'm going to always be engaged in athletics on some level physically, as long as my body holds up.
It kind of reminds me of when, right after I had the twins, that was the hard, like, all I could think about was, oh my God, who thought I could do this? Like, somebody made a mistake. And so I promised myself that whenever I had another friend who had a baby, that I would not portray myself as this made up, perfect mom who says this is the best thing ever, because it was the hardest thing ever. And so maybe with your art and your book and these podcasts and things like that, you're exposing the reality of it. Really, it's so glamorized. Football is so glamorized in the media, and you put the uniform on, you hear the music and all that. My next question kind of goes with that. But the reality is they're just kids that are on the field beating the crap out of each other, possibly having brain injuries, so they could hear in a number being called, or so they can look in the stands and their moms and dads are excited and smiling and proud of them. And I think it's important that you are exposing and bringing these emotions of what an athlete, a football player, feels.
Is that a question or a statement?
That's a statement.
Okay.
Do we have time for the next question?
Let's see. Yeah, we can quit real quick.
So, for those of you that may not know, we got married in 2000, then moved to Florida for just a year. And then after a year, Jason said, let's move to New York. And I was like, all right.
It wasn't quite like that, but yeah, pretty much. It was like,
Yeah, pretty much. So we were there for 8 years. And our first year coming back in 2009, we had the twins and came back. We joked about this forever because when we were in New York City, we sort of escaped from the high school and college football thing. NFL was a big thing there, and then baseball. Because remember that time we were at the El Greco Diner, and who was that?
They thought it was
Jason Giambi. Yeah. Like they were staring at him and kind of pointing and whatever, and that was really weird. But then when we first came back, our first fall in South Carolina, we went out to the store for something, and we were just kind of looking around like, what?
Yeah, threw up Gamecocks.
Everything was
Gamecocks.
Garnet black, and we had just been away from it so long. So my question then is, what is it about being a fan that makes people so crazy? And how did you try to portray this in your zombie cheerleader series? We're back with the Real Housewives of Kendall Projects. Yes, I'm a reality TV show junkie.
So where were we? Was the last part?
So we were talking about the garnet and black, like thrown up and all over Columbia. And so my question was, what is it about being a fan that makes people so crazy? And how'd you try to portray that in your zombie cheerleader series?
I think all the work that I've made in the 18 years deals with being a fan on some level and trying to understand that. And then understanding it to a point and then trying to resist it. I don't know what it is. We try to live vicariously through other people's actions. I think social media is a perfect example of that right now. I think we try to do that. And that's why we, self-importance and all that stuff. Being a fan allows people to escape their mundane existence and find some kind of meaning in their lives, whatever that may or may not be.
Like, for example, was it last weekend where thousands of people crowded Williams-Brice Stadium. It was like 150 degrees outside.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Sweating. Clemson, too.
Yeah, Clemson, too. Yeah.
To watch the Gamecocks lose.
Yeah.
Knowing they're going to lose. That's the best
no,
part.
No, they don't know. They don't know that. They don't know
yeah,
that.
They
but
do.
They hope. No, they don't. I think the general fan don't. They don't.
Yeah.
They hope they're going to win. Like if we could go back, if Carolina would have won, it would have been the big. We still have been talking about it now, and probably right now the Gamecocks are probably playing. If I'm correct, they either played already today.
I don't know where they played
yeah,
or who.
I think it was an away game. Who knows? I don't keep up. But you're asked about the zombie cheerleaders, and that was kind of a way of me creating a set of images dealing with the ex-athlete. Now, we've covered that pretty well, but ex-athletes or athletes in general, or even masculinity, which is a big part of my work, deals with the idea of conditional self-worth, the ability to perform physically. And then when you can't do that anymore, you seek out other ways of doing it. So the zombie cheerleaders are a representation of what I think happens to the ex-football player turned fan mentally. Like if I had to say this is what they look like in their brain, that's what I think they look like. I mean, so those of you that don't know the zombie cheerleaders, they're extremely overweight athletes. They're men that are cross-dressing cheerleaders that are zombies, and their cheerleading uniform represents who they are. So there's a cheerleader with fan on their jersey or their uniform, and one says fear, one says scared, and one says loser. So I like these words carry they're weighted words that carry a lot of meaning. As far as ex-athletes, you're a loser, or you're a fan, or you're scared. That's why you're doing it. Or your fear. Fear is one of the other ones. Fear. You're afraid. You're fearful. You live by fear. So yeah.
And just a plug for Kendall Projects, there's going to be a website coming soon. So if you like this, he's got several. These are bags. I mean, they really are pillows. Honestly, we have them on our couch and we use them all the time. And they've got the zombie cheerleaders on them. And then you've got the prints that you can purchase on your website, and whatever size.
I think we only have 2 of the originals left in drawing. The other ones have been sold. The originals will be available as well, but yeah, the prints will be available.
And then we've got the big giant ones over there that he'll hopefully display. That it's about as tall as I am, so that would
They're
be
10 by 10.
Okay.
10 by 10.
And they've got the best part is this was my idea sitting on a Friday night. He's got the Clemson and the Carolina Gamecocks colors on them, and just kind of that competition. So if you're not from South Carolina, we have 2 major major colleges in South Carolina, which is Clemson University and the University of South Carolina, and they're huge rivals. So, yeah. And I keep saying I'm going to turn into a Clemson fan because I like purple and orange, but no. We'll always be a Gamecock fan.
Clemson will always, and I'm a huge, I'm not huge, but I'm a Carolina fan, and I always pull for Carolina. But I'll tell all my Carolina fans, they'll never be as good as Clemson.
No.
Never be as good as Clemson.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons. We go to that later, but that's I'll say that. So let's move on.
Okay. So this is a good place a question that I forgot to write. So thinking about all these colors, what is it about the bright, like the blue and yellow? You've got a lot of pink. When you did the cheerleader football thing, it was tan and pink and yellow. Why do you use those more feminine looking colors? I mean, I guess they would be feminine. I don't know.
Well, traditionally, I think you could say that. I use the blue, the baby blue for baby blue, um, because of a lot of the thought that I have going into my work. I think an idea of what's masculine and feminine, and this paradigm that happens between the two during development or whatever you want to call it. And traditionally, like they'll put a blue cap on a child that's been born with a penis, and a pink cap on the child that's been born with a um, vagina. So like those kind of like cultural markers. I like to use that. The yellow itself, um, uh, it comes from the idea of being yellow. Like when someone they want to emasculate you, they're going to call you yeller or yellow. It means you're a pussy. You're a weakling. You're scared. So the yellow itself has, for me, has like that significant cultural meaning because you're scared. So anytime you're seeing yellow in the work, for the most part, I mean, there's a lot of like Dorothy project you talked about. The yellow it stands for something else, but also too, if you saw that project, like the football's in there too, and the idea of fear. And so if we're thinking about the idea of fear and the Yellow Brick Road, it's a road to fear, or it's a road on fear.
Mm.
And so it leads you to somewhere else. So could be a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, if you're willing to accept your own fear and accept your own uh, things you're scared of, it, it it offers up an opportunity to transcend and grow as a person. So yeah, and also the colors that I use are very like this is just basic color theory that we were taught in art school, like using complementary colors to make an impact, and painting, like all these colors that I'm using in the work is strictly just basic color theory and how to make something pop. If you're working with red, then the best way to make it pop is complement it with green or orange with blue and whatnot. So yeah, those are the colors. This newer piece that we've got on the wall over here, it's
I love that blue and yellow.
yeah, and also too, it's if you're keeping up with any of the sports stuff, it looks like San Diego Chargers, and San Diego Chargers is like in this existential crisis where they don't know where they want to be. They've been in San Diego for years, and now they're in L.A. There's no guarantee that they're going to stay in L.A., et cetera, et cetera. All right, we're going to stop for 1 second because we are running out of time.
Test 1, 2, 3. So did we miss half of that?
We have that on video, so we can go back to that if we need to.
And I guess that's the beauty of having me as his wife, because I always joke that I am extremely opposite of him. He is very creative. We go into the kitchen. I get a recipe. I make things. By the recipe, he goes in the kitchen and says, what can I put together? So whereas when we go to art shows, a lot of times his friends or my friends will come up and say, can you explain this to me? And my response is usually, no. Go ask him.
Well, that's you brought up a great point. I think that's what I try to do is create the conversations around the work. That's what I want. That's what and that's one thing that I think people don't seek out enough is when you experience my work, it's telling you this. I say this all the time. I've written a lot about this. It's like it's almost like you've happened upon a crime scene, and all the clues are there. You just got to do the work to put it together. And if I, as an artist, have not done my job and seduce you into thinking about those things, the work's not effective. And that's one of the things that people ask, why don't you just draw? I can't just draw. The drawing tells one part of the story. When you add video or objects or sound, smells even. Um, I just did a process show with Michaela Pilar Brown at Taps, and there were remnants from old objects that were completely soiled and sweat and still smelled, and like that adds a whole other layer of information to the work that most people aren't willing to try and uncover or whatever, you know. So yeah, I don't. Yeah, the fact they're even asking those questions, what does this mean? That's a doorway into a new understanding of the world they live in.
Right. So, okay, so my next question, again, that there's a lot of stuff that I know about you, that especially the newer people that you've met in the last 5 years, that you are also a painter, and you don't do it very often.
Right.
And so, you know, when people go, oh, he's an artist, is he a painter? No. However, one of my favorite paintings that you ever did was when you were being commissioned to do it for the lady your daddy put in an elevator. And I guess it was a glass elevator. I don't know, because she asked you to do these giant paintings. So as you'd go up the elevator, you would see them.
Right.
And they were just the coolest paintings ever. And they just, I mean, they were just awesome. Like the guy that was peeking out the window, and all the stories. And so why don't you paint?
I guess I would.
That's what people like.
Well, I'm not. Well, you know, if you know me,
well, yeah, right.
I don't make things.
It's not about
what people like. It's about getting to the bottom of something. But I guess it was probably right before we got married. I guess when I started spending a lot of time in New York City. I went and saw. I think it was around this time. Around that time. I went and saw one of my favorite painters. Her name is Jenny Saville. She's a British painter, and she does these amazing giant portraits of herself, and she's a very voluptuous woman, and not only just of herself but other women, and then plays with this idea of masculine and feminine. And so when I saw a set of her paintings in real life, they were probably, I don't know, I think the painting that I saw was probably like 12 by 15 feet wide of this face. And I'll put this in the video as well, so you see the image. But I mean, she's basically painting with house brushes that are, 6 inches wide, and they're just these swaths of paint that were just. And when you're standing, 50 feet away, it looks like an image, and as you get closer, it becomes sculptural. And I think at that time, that's what I was trying to do on a smaller scale. And then when you see somebody that has mastered it, and you understand how art works and the art world works, you realize in the moment, well, I need to do something else.
Yeah.
I need to do something else that does the same thing that painting does, but I need to use my own wheelhouse, my own set of skills to do that. And so that's when I decided at that moment, like, I am not a painter. I'm going to be a sculptor. I'm going to be a sculptor, because it would take me my entire life to be able to get to that point where she's already at. And this is 1999. I'm going to be making art for the rest of my life. I've got to do something else. Or if I do make those kind of paintings like that, I'm just going to be considered a copy of her.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it was a realm or a field that I didn't want to get into because of the competition. You realize it's kind of like people ask me all the time, like, why didn't you play? Talk to people. You play college football. They see the pictures I played at Carolina or North Greenville, and they're like, why didn't you go pro? It's that kind of idea. It's like, well, I wasn't good enough to go pro. That was one of those moments where you saw someone who is pro that's making I can never do what they do, so I need to do what I can do.
And living in New York, painters are a dime a dozen. You
Everybody,
see so many starving painters on the side of the sidewalk, painting and painting and painting.
I think it's a much more accessible medium for sure.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's difficult about painting is that so many people want a 10 by 10 painting on their wall to go above their couch, and they want it for $75.
Well, you know what? A new website, you'll be able to have that on a print. So that's
A print, but not an actual one. That's the problem, because you can't even buy the oils for a painting like that for $75.
And that's another reason, back to Lowe's. Like, that's another reason we shop at Lowe's, is because materials are archival and they last for a long time, because I make the work out of stuff that's going to be out in the weather.
And there's two kinds of art purchasers, I guess is the best way to say it. You have someone who purchases art. I had this conversation with a friend of mine recently. You purchase art because you think it's going to look good with your wallpaper or your paint or your couch. And then there are people who purchase art for the price tag because you're investing in the artist. You're investing in their talent. You're investing in the ideas, because I mean, the reality is, you think about how much money we spend that we don't have on this work. And so many people are saying, oh, well, keep making it. Well, that's great, but
you ain't buying it.
Right. Nobody's buying it.
Or they're not buying enough of it. They are.
Right.
Some people are buying it.
Right. But like the sculpture that you posted recently, I mean, how much? It's probably $300-400 easy on supplies. And then you think about the time that you took. But somebody wants it for $100. Well, that's like saying, okay, well, why don't you go to your job and work for 5 cents an hour?
Yeah. I mean, people will just say that it's a labor of love. Well, sure, I get that. I understand that, but sometimes it's a business too.
Yeah. Coin the term starving artist. But anyway, all right. So let's move on.
That's all right. Stop. We got to reset.
Okay, so we just finished talking about painting. And so, of course, I am always poking you to draw. Just draw. I remember sitting with you on a beach when we were first married. We lived in Florida. And we were talking about drawing. And you said, here, just take this paper. We were looking at a lifeguard stand. Now, I'm a color by numbers. I told you I'm not like, I remember when we were trying to get ready for the girls' nursery, and I was so excited. We went to Hancock Fabrics, and I was so overwhelmed because I walked in there and it was all this fabric, and I could not see it. I can't see it. That's just how my brain works. But anyway, so we were sitting there, and you said, just draw it. Here's the paper. Here's the pencil. Just draw what you see. And it was so frustrating for me, because when I look out of a blank piece of paper, I see a blank piece of paper. I don't see what you guys see, what you see. So what makes it so easy? And it seems like you just draw constantly.
Well, I don't.
Does it come natural to you? What do you think about when you're drawing? Are you conscious?
I think the older I get, it's harder.
I mean, yes, you're conscious, but
yeah, I think the older I get, it's harder and harder. All right, to try to explain it to the layman or the person that's not an artist, I can draw whatever I want to draw.
It drives me crazy.
And make it look real. So, especially from a photograph or from a live subject, I can draw it as it is in front, at least how I see it in front of me. But you only can do that for so long before it becomes boring. It's almost like a cover song. I like to think about it like in terms of music. Like, you can learn someone else's song, and you can play it just like they play it. Or at least play it with a track and play it with them. But at some point, it's got to be yours. It's got to become yours, and you have to write your own song. And so drawings are now very much like that for me. Like, I have a general idea. I try to put down a form or something on the page, and then allow the drawing to form itself. Like, how lines work together. I do things. I choose paper according to how the mark it's going to make. I generally do draw with a mechanical pencil for the most part, just because it's smaller. The drawings themselves are generally no bigger than 14 by 11.
I'm looking at these up here. Can they see them in the camera? No.
Maybe, probably not. So they're smaller, and so I allow them to go where they need to go. Now I'm making drawings and things that are just trying to turn off my own censor, my own preconception of what I think they should be, and allowing to be what they need to be. And that's harder to do than just drawing from a photograph or drawing. Like, for example, if you said draw a golf player, I could draw that and make it look absolutely realistic. But that's not fun. It's work. I don't enjoy doing it.
All right, I want to pause for just a second, and I'm going to give you a word, and I want you to tell me the first thing that pops into your head. It can be a word, it can be a phrase. Okay? New York City.
A living organism.
Crayons.
Versatile.
Roxy.
Badass.
Guitars.
Something that makes the back of your hair, the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Pop, as in Papa Kendall. Pop Kendall, your granddaddy.
My Papa? Lost.
Football.
Unethical.
Triathlons.
The test of self.
The Compound in Florida.
The Compound. Think tank.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so I don't want to talk about this a lot because I know it's still so raw, but I just want to talk about teaching briefly.
I reserve the right to say no comment.
Okay. Everything you seem to do, when you put your mind to it, you work your tail off, and it seems to become easy for you. And I actually kind of asked you this question this morning off camera. And not necessarily because it's naturally easy, but because you just have a drive to succeed. You have it in you. And you were an art teacher for 7 years in the education system. And I watched you teach and create lessons and study and research and teach and recreate and study and research. And why aren't they getting it? Why aren't I getting through to these kids? And no matter how hard you tried, you just didn't seem to feel successful. Why?
I go back to the easiest answer I can tell you right now. I felt like I felt like the square peg trying to go in the round hole. I think it's easier to get a round peg into a square hole. The opposite's true for me. I believe that the education system is not built or designed for free thinkers, both for teachers and students. And also, too, I think I think you asked me this morning. I don't know exactly what you asked me this morning, but my answer was something along the lines that the teaching part was not the hard part. It was all the other stuff that went along with it. Constantly having to legitimize myself about my content, why that's important, and trying to make kids aware of the fact that the world that they lived in was created by artists. Even though we are inundated with politics and cultural norms, and I probably would get a lot of heat from this. Is there's a certain amount of personal responsibility that goes into being educated. The idea of being educated is something that, as an educated person, you're always trying to be better. And I think in general, our society wants that quick fix. And I struggle with it too. Like even now, like we're the third video. This is our third video. And all the research and everything I've done, like this is just like the small tip of the beginning of all of it. But you want that instant gratification right now. And I think that's something I struggled with as a teacher is the kids wanted the instant A. They wanted the instant gratification. And it comes
without the work.
Without the work, or they wanted the easy work or whatever. And it's not their fault. I'm not blaming kids. I hear a lot that kids are not lazy. Well, I mean, I think kids are taught to be lazy.
Or there's a new phrase that I saw recently. We used to have the helicopter parents, and now we have something called the lawnmower parents, where parents are always just trying to mow down and mow over adversity.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that immediately we watched Last Chance U recently, and one of the quarterbacks and the show and the coach said, "How can you not get an A and R?" Well, fuck, it's art's not easy, man. And the kid he was not a very good artist. He was not a very good image maker. I'm not saying he's not a good artist because I try to. When I was teaching, I told kids that drawing well has nothing to do with making good art. It's a part of it, but it's not. It's not absolutely crucial to having success. It's the work you put in. Art is a very difficult thing to do. Whether in all gamuts, like writing a story, writing a short story, painting a picture, creating a sculpture, dancing, drama. It's an amazing amount of work. Filmmakers are probably the hardest working individuals in the arts community. It's not you got to work, man. And you've got to be able to take criticism on the back end.
I think that right there is the part that's so frustrating because you as an art, I mean, even as a teacher, I know, and this is about you and Kendall Projects, but even as a teacher, like one of the things that I love is when a principal comes in and gives me an observation, and it drives me crazy when they give me, "Oh, this is great." No, I'd like some constructive criticism. I'd like to be a better teacher. And I think, and this might be an ignorant statement, but the majority of society, they don't want that constructive criticism. They want to be good and just move on.
Well, I don't know if they don't want it.
They fear it, maybe?
No, I don't know. They don't understand the necessity of it.
For growth.
Yeah, one of the things we've got. I think I have enough time to explain this before we have to break again. But I always welcomed the harshest criticism of my ideas. There were many times when I was in a studio visit with somebody or a critique where I didn't know, and I was kind of just throwing up ideas like this is what I'm thinking about, and those were great because people would comment or whatever. But when you put a finished work out and you say this is gonna, there it is. What do you think? When I left those critiques or those conversations angry and confused, it always pushed me to a better place. Always. And it makes you angry. It makes you feel uncomfortable. You question what the hell am I doing? All of those things. But in a moment, if you're worth your weight, you're going to say, all right, well, fuck you. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to prove you wrong, or I'm going to fix this, or I am going to do A, B, and C to make this successful. And I don't think that artists seek that out enough. I have some really good friends that are musicians, and they value my opinion of their art because I'm a fan, one, and I'm a consumer, two. And I have to be conscious of that idea of like, I want to, even if I love it, I want to say that that's not good enough here, or it's not good enough here.
There's always a place where you can improve.
Yeah, always.
Okay, that took a good turn. I'm glad.
Why do you
say you and I both know these past 7 years have been probably some of the hardest, and we were both not certain that we were going to make it out of it.
Alive.
Yeah.
Alive.
However, I believe that everything happens for a reason, and I told you this the other day that you started out as an elementary school teacher major. And actually, you really started out as a animator for Disney. That's what you wanted to do until you realized that everybody else at Ringling University or Ringling School of Art and Design wanted to do the same thing. And then you decided to be an elementary school teacher, and then you changed it. Then you came back to that. And I feel like these last 7 years were such a growing experience for all of us, not only just at Kendall Projects, but at the Kendall family. And there's a hunger inside of you to let people see art and real art. And I just feel like that was necessary. Those 7 years were necessary for us to be where we are today. So something a little bit lighter.
Lighter?
Yeah. So let's go to my favorite drawings. Yep.
4 minutes.
Oh, yeah. 4. I was going to say 4 drawings.
4 minutes.
The album covers.
Oh, the album covers. Okay.
Yeah,
what about
you actually put one on Instagram. Which one?
It's the Jungle Welcome, the Welcome Jungle, or something like that along those lines. I think the title has changed throughout the years. I like to use if you any experience in the work, especially like text of the work, I use capitals to emphasize dialect. I think that words are objects that carry huge weight. So just welcome jungle welcome, or whatever can carry an immense amount of weight.
And those 4, I have to say, they are hanging on our wall in our bedroom, and you brought them out for Open Studios a couple years ago just for display, and it was almost like we pulled a piece of us out of the house, and it felt really weird. And someone, if anybody ever decides they want those 4, they're going to have to pay a pretty price, because those are my those
so
are
dearly.
those are really special to me. They're really important to me.
Well, they're special to me too. They are.
But what inspired you to draw those, and how long did it take you to do those 4 drawings? Because they are so detailed.
The idea. Let me check our time. Let's check our time. 2 minutes. All right. I'm a performance artist, and I made those in New York, in a small little back room of our railroad apartment, which was my studio at the time. And
Like
I wanted
2 foot by 2 foot.
no, not quite that, but it was small for sure. And I was thinking about doing a set of drawings that would be a performance for myself. So what I did was, and I was also too at this first. This was my first headlong into creating art about my experience as a football player. So I thought about the albums that I used to listen to before football games to get me pumped up. So what if I did that in the context of making art? So I made some parameters for myself and say I'm going to do these 4 drawings based on these 4 albums, and when I'm working on the specific drawings, I'm only allowed to listen to that specific music to make the drawings. So there are 4 drawings. So one of them is AC/DC's Black and Black, LL Cool J's Mama Said Knock You Out, Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet.
Shot through the. All right, so we were talking about the album covers, and you said you gave yourself parameters for it. Asked how long it took and why you did it. I think you pretty much answered that.
Well, I did. I talked about it. I set a parameter myself, but one of the things I didn't talk about is I think there was even one point in the drawings that I would erase most of the drawing and then go back in because I was using a really thick paper. I was able to almost etch into the paper. So yeah, so that was it. So there are 4 drawings that are based on albums that I listened to constantly while I was making the drawings. And then and also too, that was one of the first, a long time, sat down and said I'm gonna make some drawings that I would sell if I was going to do a show.
Okay, so I'm stuck on the drawing thing because
Just let you know we're running out of battery all around, so that's the luxury of not having enough equipment. So, but go ahead, keep talking. If we get cut off, folks, we apologize, but we are working on a limited budget here. We'll probably keep rolling on audio, but we might have to cut the video short. Okay, go ahead.
So, I notice when you do drawings, most of the time you do a series, and I'm a start to finish kind of gal. I like to start something, finish it, put a check.
Yeah.
You take 4 pieces of paper and you start, and you do a little on each. And then why? Why do you do that?
Well, conformity. I think that when you're doing a series, they have to relate to each other. They have to have a relationship. And from a drawer's or a draftsman's point of view, like you do one drawing, and time passes, it's going to look different no matter what. So the idea of doing them constantly, and also too, I've always got so much going on in the studio. Like there's a set of drawings over there, like probably 10 drawings that are being made right now that I'll go back to as I'm making sculptures, playing guitar, planning performances, working through other ideas. Because what happens when you're working on those drawings, immediately in a second, like your mind goes to something else and you stop it and you go work on whatever, or you flip the drawing. You flip, I want to do, instead of doing it on this drawing, I want to pull this over. I'll do this technique on that drawing, and then just kind of builds itself. But at the same time, it's uniform. It makes sense as a group.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I do what I do. And it's just because there's so much going on in the studio, and then also always going on in my brain. Like now we're dealing with marketing, like digital presence, what I need to do for the website, content like this, the actual objects that'll be sold, whatever, exhibitions, like administrative work. And so, yeah.
So I want to talk about guitars for a little while.
Oh.
So
I don't know if we got enough time on that. We'll try. We'll try. We've run out of I'm running out of space. But go ahead, keep going.
So I was thinking back to when I was thinking about this question, and I bought you your first guitar at a pawn shop
Yeah, yeah.
for
That
your
ended up
birthday,
ended up being a sculpture in a piece.
and then your
Cousin,
your
anyway.
second guitar actually came from my dad,
Mhm.
and we all know that you and my dad didn't really get along with each other, but that for some reason connected you two,
Yeah, I think music connects people.
and you took that guitar, and when he was at hospice house, you went by yourself and played for him.
Yeah, yeah, I did. That was something I needed to do for him. Um, Also, too, just to prove that it didn't go to waste, and it's not going to go to waste. I mean, they'll have that for that guitar forever. It's a great guitar. I mean, even though with its warp and everything, it's still a great sounding guitar.
So I guess you kind of answered my question. My question was going to be, can you talk about that guitar for a minute? And really, how did that one guitar start you on the journey to playing guitar?
Well, I had I'd always been able to pick around on a guitar. Um, when you mentioned the compound earlier, there was a guitar. I want to say it was either Ashley's or Sterling's guitar. Definitely wasn't Landon because he was left-handed. That was always around, and I only knew a limited amount of chords, uh, limited amount of chords, and I would make sounds on it. And that was even also too. I think there was a slide or a piece of pipe that was around that I always kind of played just to see what would happen. That was also that was so too. That was after you initially um, bought that original guitar. And when I learned that guitar, I didn't understand. I was teaching myself, and this was before YouTube or any video to teach you. Like, so I was trying to teach myself, and I didn't want to learn chords. I wanted to be the soloist, and that
First chair.
yeah, when we first, yeah, exactly right. I didn't understand that there was a certain amount of work had to go into that. So I put it down and then picked it up, and then I played harmonica for years, probably 1995, and also seriously, like I played in a few bands, and um, there were things I did that were performance based where I played harmonica, and that was just transferring knowledge from playing the trombone and knowing about piano and into another instrument. So guitar is like so when you well, I'd been all right. So yeah, so the Dorothy Project. There was a part in the Dorothy Project where I needed somebody to play the witch. I had played all the other characters in the project, Dorothy and Glinda and the other characters, but I needed somebody to play the witch, and because it was a Pink Floyd thing, they had to learn "Wish You Were Here," and it's part of one of the films, the short films. I don't even think this is up on video anywhere. But so that guitar that you bought me, pawn shop, broke, which ended up being turned into a sculpture later. But you got that guitar from from your dad, so I could learn "Wish You Were Here," and it just kind of was a windfall of everything started to make sense. Like all of a sudden, like once I got my fingers in shape where they could hold strings down and hold chords down, the world opened up, and I began learning songs that I'd been wanting to learn forever, and then now writing my own songs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've always loved it. Like I'm always a huge fan of rock and roll and huge fan of live music. So the guy that can, or the guy, I'll say that like, it's not just the guys, the people. Like there's some of my favorite guitarists and singers that are able to sit up there with a guitar and sing are women, but the ability to do that, it's like a religious experience. I liken it to when I was talking about the hair on the back of your neck stands up. If you ever had that experience in church or whatever, like that's what I'm trying to communicate through art. And the guitar is a way of doing that. Like I do know that there's probably a chance I could pick up that guitar and play a riff and get more of a response emotionally from somebody than I did if they looked at my drawings.
Right.
So yeah, that's why guitars. They're a voice. They're another kind of voice.
So then your next guitar became was your 40th birthday present, which is the uh, I don't even know because
Faith bought me like a early 2000s Epiphone Les Paul. It's cherry. It's great. It's an amazing guitar. Almost too much like it's. I don't play it as often as I should play it.
So then, which then became the next challenge for you, is to make a guitar. You know, like who does that? Who says, okay, yeah, let's see if I can make one. And so you did one for a kit and then completely redesigned it, and then you made one from scratch. So do you consider those musical instruments or sculptures?
I think they're both. If you haven't seen the documentary with Jimmy Page, they are a piece of sculpture. Especially older guitars or custom guitars, not made by a machine, only a machine. They have a life of their own according to the kind of wood, who put them together, the kind of glue they use, the parts, the sound that it makes. So yeah, I think they're living sculptures. They're living sculptures because they have a voice. If you can sing, it'll tell you a story. So yeah, I like that. And I think it became more.
Did you want to see how it worked? Did you want to like literally pull? You made one so you could pull it apart to see how it worked?
No, it was a kid that I had in class. He was like, "I'm gonna make a guitar." And I was like, "Oh yeah, what do you mean? I'm a guitar player or whatever." And he started to talk about how he was gonna make this thing, and he showed me these cheap kits that was basically like, the fraction of a cost of a brand new guitar. And I was a guitar nerd anyway. I was like, man, look, I buy this kit for $150, man. I can make a $1,000 guitar, and it sounds just as good as something I bought. So I was like, I can do that. If he can do that, a kid I can do that. That didn't know anything about maybe a little bit. Well, a 16-year-old kid that knows good amount of woodworking. Like I know all this stuff about woodworking. What kind of guitar would I produce if I did that? And also at the same time, I was doing a project for 701 Center of Contemporary Art, this series of performances like that was developing too. Like how can that feed into that performance? I was already using the Epiphone. I was going to use the Epiphone for that project, but I was like, well, what if I made this instead as an actual object or a sculpture that would be considered part of that? And we were talking about Dada and this idea of just putting something out and letting it be in context, what it would change the view of the art. But that's art history, but that's, yeah. And then, you were asking about the one I made from scratch. That thing is beautiful, and I think I did an amazing job on it. It is a monster. I would guess it's probably 15 or 16 pounds, and you just put it on your shoulder. Pardon me. You should put it on your shoulder, and it's really just too much to play. It has a big, giant sound.
But why? Why did you want to make one from scratch, from a piece of
wood?
Oh,
see if I could. Just see if
course.
I could do it. I see if I would. If all I had learned from making one for my kid, if I could transfer it into a object that I can say I did from scratch. Yeah.
So here's my last question, and then I have one more thing I want to do with you. Friday nights. This is honestly the kind of conversation we have just about every single Friday night. I guess that's why we still like each other.
Well, we don't have to stop every 20 minutes.
Right, that's true.
But we have to stop every 20 minutes to pee because we're drinking. I'm the only one drinking tonight. Faith's not indulging. I was very nervous about this whole process. So.
But I live with you. Why are you nervous?
Because you're not the only one that's going to see it.
Gotcha. Okay, so sometimes at night, on Friday nights, I ask what you're thinking with your art. We sit in here surrounded by all this stuff. And you'll often say, I'm not sure yet. I got something in my mind, but I can't really tell you right now. Walk me through that process. How does that work for you?
I think it works for me on a lot of different levels, but I start with the what if. What if I combine this with that? What would happen? And it's usually something really outrageously difficult. Dorothy Project we've mentioned several times. Like, what if I made a body of work that was a riff on the idea that Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd lines up with The Wizard of Oz, and then throwing all my own personal history into it. Now that produced this amazing experience and journey that created, I mean, years worth of work and so that's how it starts. I try to challenge myself. I'm like, all right, what is something you're not good at, or something? What would be something that would test your ability to make things? What would hurt in the process of making it? And I do that to my own. Oh man, I think I'm even now like regretting that stance on how to make things because I'm not sure where it's going to go. I like to think about it in terms of like a songwriter too, like a songwriter that's made we're talking like successful songwriters, even like Willie Nelson, for example. Willie Nelson, he'll even say that every time he sits down to write a new song, he's always doubtful of him being able to write a song because he feels like he's maybe done all the songs. So, an artist, when you're making these projects and you're doing these things, like, am I doing something? Am I going to be able to sit down and make a piece of work that's not a repop or something else that I've already dealt with and something new and fresh? That anxiety always comes in, and that maybe is why I'm doing so many different things, because it works in a cycle that that's blocked. Now I'm doing this or whatever, and then it comes around to this perfect storm that's the exhibition. So yeah, that's how I think it works. I ask the what if first, and then begin the process of investigation. And I drown myself in knowledge and text and influence and all that stuff. One of the things you're going to see in the coming videos from Kendall Projects is how what's going on behind me is feeding into a project. So I just accumulate and collect things, images, ideas, words, phrases, lyrics from songs, poems, whatever, and it just creates a perfect storm that ends up being the final exhibition that comes out later on.
Okay, so here's the last thing. I thought this would be kind of fun because in New York we used to watch hours and hours of Inside the Actor Studio with James Lipton.
Great.
And he always ended his interviews with a series of questions. So here goes the questions.
All right.
What's your favorite word?
Fuck.
What's your least?
Motherfucker. Like, I like to add the motherfucker on it. But fuck.
Okay.
Fuck. Fuck. I love that word. Fuck.
Yeah.
All right, good. Keep
that
going.
drives me crazy. What is your least favorite word?
Church.
What turns you on creatively?
Failure.
What turns you on spiritually?
Redemption.
What turns you off?
Negative people.
I'm not going to ask what your favorite curse word is because I already know. And I started to say this is a...
Oh, I didn't know. All right, wait. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll go back. Well, that we're out. We're out of that. We're out. So, folks, we are just audio right now.
Almost done.
All right, hold on 1 second. Well, Faith just asked me about my favorite word was fuck. Okay, that's my favorite curse word. My favorite word, it would have to be... Favorite word.
So the actors know these questions are coming, so they have it prepared.
Some of them are easy.
Mm-hmm.
But tough, man. That's a tough one. Wait. I've got to get this out. We're just audio now, so we are fine. Damn. I want to say create. That's the thing, or make. MAKE. Make.
What sound or noise do you love?
The human voice, a cappella, or a slide guitar.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Man. The click when your car doesn't crank up.
Oh, yeah. What profession other than being a full-time artist would you love to attempt?
Songwriter.
And James Lipton always says, if heaven exists, but I'm going to say, because I know heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Dude, did it have to be that hard?
And last, who would you want standing there waiting for you?
Man, I'm glad we don't have a video right now. I don't know. Too many to list.
He's flipping me off right now, people. And that's a wrap.